All right, let's do it. Welcome to the broadcast. This is the inaugural induction ceremony to the Peoplevox 10x Hall of Fame, where we are delighted to welcome a true legend of operations, warehousing, e-commerce, fulfillment from Australia. I am Leo from Peoplevox Marketing. I'm joined with Oliver Rhodes. How you doing, Ollie?
Very good.
And the legend that is joining us today, we know him from Good Pair Days. So Good Pair Days, a digital-first, direct-to-consumer monthly wine service based out of Sydney, Australia, coupling expert curation with tech-based personalization to pair customers with the perfect wine for their palates. This is a man that started his career in a liquor distribution centre for Woolworths before going on to work for brands like The Iconic, Stylecraft, Tidy Me, Athenex, and Man & Noble in a number of innovative operational roles. As I said, we know him best as the head of operations for Good Pair Days between January 2019 and January 2020. Welcome to the Hall of Fame, Jay Carpenter.
What great. Thanks, guys.
How do you feel about this honor that we've bestowed upon you?
Completely overwhelmed.
Amazing. That's fantastic.
Oh, I feel like crying.
Thanks so much. Now, the thing that I guess sticks out to me initially from your profile, Jay, is you got a number of roles within the beer and wine and liquor industry. What is it about those types of companies that you love working for?
Apart from being a fan of the product, to be honest, I think there's a lot of opportunity in those businesses. When you look at the vast difference between Woolworths liquor distribution going into coming out of one of the best supply chains in Australia in the supermarket supply chain space, through to a small, developing and growing wine personalization business. There's so many different challenges between those two spaces, and there's everything in between as well. So I think on one side there, you've got a business who was one of the first to innovate a lot of warehouse and operations technologies in Australia, being Woolworths, and a lot of investment in automation and tech, and then an emerging player who needed to find the ability to leverage those same pieces of technology, but on a much different scale.
Yeah, awesome. Well, before we get into Good Pair Days, it'd be great to hear about your time at the Iconic, actually. So I think people in Australia will know there was a huge fashion online player now, but I guess back in 2012, 2013, when you got involved, it was a bit of a different proposition.
Yeah, absolutely. It was very much in its infancy. So I remember the day I went for an interview there at the warehouse, which was at Wetherill Park here in Sydney at the time. I heard an ad on the radio for them, and they were just starting to appear in people's minds, and they had at that time a very large marketing budget. But the operation at that time certainly hadn't kept up. They were a business in hyper-growth mode, pretty well constantly, and were doubling and tripling their revenue within the year for several years, year on year. So walking into the warehouse and seeing that they still didn't have racking installed because they had just moved out of a third-party logistics provider and were starting their first own warehouse, and seeing pallets on the floor, no racking installed, a lot of processes that you just wouldn't expect for a business of their size because they'd come from a very small business very quickly. So joining that business was a pretty easy decision to make. I came out of Fairfax Media just before that, where I was helping to run and set up a third-party logistics channel for them here in Sydney. And the print media industry that essentially that was an industry on a very different trajectory to what the Iconic was, which was a rocket internet-funded machine that was just ready to take over and completely change the way Australian consumers shop for fashion. And so with that, I guess it was joining a team where they were on the hunt for really talented people across all the different parts of the business. And so entering that was quite, again, the word overwhelming at times, because you know, the people they had and what they were working on was truly innovative stuff. And I think about day one versus 4 years later or 3.5 years later when I left, and just the change in that business. But one thing that didn't change was just continuing to push the envelope and requiring an operational shift very quickly. So a marketing attempt that they would, an execution they would attempt that they would expect a 5 to 10% uplift, and we would have a 70% increase in orders overnight, and we would have to shift. And when I joined, we were just starting to hire our first 20 or 25 iconic casuals. The week I started, they were employed, and before that it was all agency staff and a couple of permanents. And getting those people on board and understanding what was going to change now that they were a part of the foundation of the operations and warehouse team, essentially, that would help us manage this growth. So coming into the business, getting them started, and then figuring out what do we need to do right now to get the people part fixed, get these people understanding what is important to the customer experience of this business, which was one of the pillars of the Iconic, and how they played a part in creating that customer experience from a warehouse role. The processes that they were doing, taking a look at the processes involving those people with every single process in the warehouse, because it needed to change constantly and rapidly. And then the systems as well. So looking at how we could use better IT systems to support more efficient operations. So to the point there, the marketing team was very, very effective in what they did, and we need to be as equally effective, essentially. And that was the challenge and the fun of working in a business like the Iconic.
Yeah, that's amazing. I guess one of the challenges that I've seen is you guys managed to set up a warehouse in Melbourne that could offer 3-hour deliveries. So you talk about customer experience and the kind of promises the brand is making to its customers. That's a pretty punchy one to go for.
Yeah, so that was something we started in Sydney, and it was really effective. And it was effective because we had a warehouse in Sydney. So between a guy called Mirko Matvey, who was running the project and setting up all the IT tech, I was partnered with him to handle the operations of launching that in Melbourne, which was a really different proposition because we didn't have a large 12,000 square metre warehouse, and we needed to be really selective with our inventory and really cost effective in how we could provide that service. And again, coming back to some really smart people in the business, there was a tight deadline for that project because we tied it into a marketing exercise, which was called Shop the Runway, where essentially we hosted a fashion show that people in real time on the internet could shop the pieces that the models were wearing down the runway, and we would then deliver it to them in 3 hours. So it was, really interesting. And we did really well. It executed well. The warehouse was set up in time, and we made some decisions like using the warehouse space out of our 3-hour delivery partner. And it was a very small warehouse, which created a lot of challenges to get enough inventory into it. But at the end of the day, we went live with that marketing campaign. It was on the internet and it was broadcast, and we had orders coming in within minutes, and we were sending orders out to customers within 3 hours, which was a completely different experience to the Australian shopper. And I was really happy to be a part of that in getting the operational piece working.
That's great. What year are we talking for this?
That would have been 2014, I believe.
Okay.
2013, 2014. Yeah.
A little way before Amazon Prime.
If we fast forward to Good Pair Days, if we can, you mentioned emerging business model, kind of growing market segment as well. What was it that really drew you to those guys to start with, and then what were some of the sort of initial statements or missions that you were given to really get going when you started working with Good Pair Days?
Yeah, so there'll be a bit of a theme for what draws me to businesses, and it was actually a bunch of really smart guys again. So when I went through the interview process and I was able to meet with the leaders of that business and the founders, they were quite inspirational in their passion for their business, and that they were trying to do something different that nobody else was doing in a way that hadn't been seen in our Australian logistics or wine industry before them. So they were already on a really good trajectory because they put a lot of hard work in, and what they were saying at the time was that we just don't know operations. We haven't done it before. We think we've done a pretty good job to get it to this point, but we've got some pretty big plans to continue to grow this business at a rapid rate. And we want someone to come in and just take the reins for that part of the business and tell us what we don't know. And so I guess the immediate opportunity there was that there was a lot of manual process that they had managed to support with some tech they developed themselves, which I haven't seen a system like it before. And I don't know if I will again, because they just did something really clever to make their business work.
Yeah.
And my remit, I guess, in entering the business was to make sure that we were able to sustain the growth. It was going to be sustainable from an operational function and system point of view, and to make sure that if there was tech out there or innovative things that we could do from a operational day-to-day perspective or a customer experience perspective, that we were exploring those and looking for implementations that would set us apart from other players in the industry.
Yeah.
I guess that one of the immediate weaknesses, though, was a warehouse management system overall. Hence the relationship with you guys. We went out looking for ways that we could take those manual processes in the warehouse and turn them around quite easily and quickly without a huge cost. Because essentially in a startup environment, which Good Pair Days was, cash is always king. And so finding cost-effective ways to maximize the output of the warehouse was done through the implementation of a warehouse management system pretty quickly. So in that, I think we did that really well because of the strengths were the people in the business. So the IT, the co-founder who was responsible for building the platform was able to get things up and running really quickly by himself, essentially. And he did an incredible job to build the integrations and to tap it into their proprietary system. And really, I guess the PeopleVox piece of that was there was a great access to them through their own API and through the documentation that was provided. So a smart guy with me telling him what we needed, and we're able to get some pretty fundamental changes happening pretty quickly. And that was the platform for growth, though. That was the ability to double the business in a relatively short period of time and to enable us to continue to deliver on the customer promise.
Yeah. And I guess this stuff was all underpinned by the kind of relaunch or the rebrand through the summer of 2019 and getting things going from a new perspective like that.
Of course. So that was going to be one of the main drivers for growth. So when I entered, I guess there was big plans to change from the wine gallery, which had been a name and a brand that had served them well since the company was started, but to go for something that was going to speak to a different customer in a different way. So a complete rebrand and relaunch that was happening pretty much as soon as I entered the business. They were just starting that process. And as a part of that, looking at the forecast numbers for the expected growth that would come from the rebrand and the associated marketing activities, started to see pretty quickly that those processes would be breaking in the warehouse, that it would not be able to maintain double the volume. And so layout changes, technology changes, looking at the roles of the people in that warehouse as well, and what they needed to do day to day to ensure that things were happening, was all to make sure that relaunch or the rebrand could be as successful as possible. The last thing we wanted was to, and ultimately it happened on day one, but to relaunch and then be unable to ship orders. Because we actually, at the same time that we relaunched the new website, is when we launched the warehouse management system as well. So it was many balls in the air at the same time, and effectively it all come together really well.
Awesome. So Jay, where does this leave you now? So we're interesting times, but summer or winter for you 2020. What's the ambition next? What are you working on? What are you excited about? Other than this award?
Yeah, so right now I'm in a business called Man and Noble, essentially on a contract basis, to again focus on areas of opportunity to improve warehouse operations across their multiple countries at the moment. So they're a distributor primarily, but a business that has a few different verticals inside of it because of the entrepreneurial nature of the owners. So at this point in time, I'm really enjoying that. There's a lot of interesting things happening and a bunch of good brands that they're representing and really growing strongly in the Australian marketplace. And again, looking for ways to help that business support the growth that they're going through by leveraging tech and innovation, but also finding new ways to challenge the status quo of what other people are doing and how they're doing it and how can they do it better. So next, I mean, ultimately that is a short-term contract for most of this year. If there was an opportunity to continue that, that might be where I am in the 12 months time. If it's not, then I'd be looking for any business that is entrepreneurial in spirit, innovative in nature, and is basically run, and not necessarily by the founders or owners or CEO, but run by the people who are working in that business with real ambition to just change the way things are done in that particular industry. So, I mean, I've got a couple of ideas of my own for businesses that I've been working on over the years, and they're always in the background, and I'm just waiting for the right time to focus on them. But I got five kids, and I've got an 8-week-old at the moment, a 2-year-old, and a 3.5.
Sorry, how many?
What?
Yeah, we've got a little girl, Zuri, who's just born in a couple of months ago, just before Valentine's Day. We've got my little boy, Lex, who's 2.5. We've got Acacia, who turns 4 in August. And then my stepsons, Ronan and Caden, who are 14 and 15. So, I think sometimes working for somebody else and not having to take everything home, even though there's plenty of work being done at home these days, is advantageous at this time for me to keep some sanity.
Yeah.
But who knows? There's always the ambition to be the master of my own domain. I think, part of my career has been spent in between roles where I've focused on looking for that consultative role to businesses, and I've taken short-term contracts with short-term objectives, and I've really liked that. I guess it's just uncertainty that comes with that my young family can't support at all times. So now what's next? I hope that I'm in a senior role, or even not senior role, but an influential role within a business that is looking to grow really quickly, do things differently, but do things better.
Gosh, that's amazing. What do you reckon, Ollie?
Well, I love that correction. That correction there. He said senior and he went one. It's all about being influential, making an impact. And Jay doesn't know this, but it was chatting to him, and when he went through his forecast numbers of what he needed to do with Good Pair Days, I'm not often faced with an adversary who gets WMS probably as well, if not better than I do. And we often talk about taking the PeopleVox platform and people tailoring it to their own businesses. And usually what it means is I kind of work out how to tailor it to their business to some degree. But that definitely wasn't the case for Jay. He took everything that we had in the locker and he went and deployed it all. And I was very fortunate to travel to Sydney to see the operation with him. And there was a few things that I picked out from that I've told many people about. And I think that's the thing. If you've got a deployment of a warehouse system that's worth talking about and worth telling other people about, then that in itself is a worthy entry to our Hall of Fame. Throwing on top of that, the guy's a legend. He gave me 3 bottles of wine. I've still got my Good Pair Days bottle opener. The wine is so long gone, it's untrue. But there we go. For those reasons, Jay Carpenter, you are the inaugural member of the PeopleVox Hall of Fame. Welcome to the club.
Welcome.
Thank you very much, guys. It's been great, and thank you for taking the time to listen. And I continue to watch what you guys are doing as well with anticipation. Hopefully, there's more opportunities to leverage the cool things you guys are doing and to support myself and any businesses I am working in. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
All right.